Hello, Spark fans. Welcome back to Advancing Spark, brought to you by Advancing Analytics, your friendly neighborhood data and AI consultancy. Yeah, it's time to talk about Databricks News. We are in February, which means we can look back at January 2025 and have a look at all the platform release notes and the new Databricks runtime and have a look at what is good. That is the plan. As always, if you're new around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. And then, yeah, let us know which bit you're interested in and we'll do a follow-up video. So, let's just get stuck straight into it. I have got the Azure flavor of the release notes. As always, use the flavor of the release notes that is the cloud platform you're using. Makes sense. I hope everyone does. And I'm just going to focus on the January 2025. So we're going to dive in there, dive into the release notes, reject cookies, go all the way down to the bottom so we can follow it as it went through, and just have a chat about the things that as they came up, which I think are interesting, which I think people have slept on, because there's some interesting stuff in here. So let's crack on. So a bunch of models have disappeared from the foundational model fine-tuning stuff. So foundational models, essentially the big bunch of open source models you can just call straight through via an API. Fine-tuning foundational models is when you can go, oh, I like that model, but I want to take a copy of it, fine-tune the end to adjust the weights, make a new model, and then host it so I can call it myself. So some models are now disappearing from there as we get this constant churn of newer and better models. Some of the old ones just get dropped off. One of the old runtimes, 15.3 support is ended. Also 15.2 support is ended. Don't know why that happened after 3, but whatever, it's fine, it happens. AI Gateway now supports provisioned throughput. So AI Gateway is essentially, think of it like a load balancer for your various different cloud AI services. It was originally suggested as kind of a way to control all the different third-party things you're doing. Maybe you're calling through to Hugging Face, to OpenAI, to various things. And this gateway acts as a single throughput, so you can manage cost and provisioning and load balancing and all that kind of good stuff. And now the foundational models can be part of it as well. So there's a bunch of foundational models. Again, your Llamas, your Mistrals, your various different ones that were kind of hosted for you via Databricks, but you couldn't do the same API gateway stuff, the AI gateway stuff. So things like rate limiting and only do certain ones you could do on a model by model basis. But being able to just as a general, this is how all of our serving goes, plus some guardrails, some safety features, plus some various different failover stuff. Interesting stuff. So that now supports foundational models for provisioned throughput when you've provisioned your own rather than doing the paper token. Very importantly. New release of the Databricks Agents SDK, and that is getting loads and loads and loads of updates recently. So essentially, if you're building out your agents, you're building out agentic framework stuff, there's lots of stuff going on there. We haven't covered it enough on the channel. So we'll be doing some more bits and pieces about that. Do not worry. Teradata is now available through Lakehouse Federation. Lakehouse Federation is when you have a Unity catalog and you have all your Delta tables and you go, oh, but I've just got a SQL server. I've got an Oracle server. I've got various other third-party bits of compute and data storage. And it looks like it's part of your data catalog. People can query it, and it'll do a pass-through query to whatever that is and bring some results back as if it was part of your lake. That now supports Teradata, so you can just have that as part of your transparent single pane of glass for your data platform. Massive release for the JDBC driver. Tons of stuff that is in there. Bunch of security stuff, bunch of authentication stuff, lots and lots of stuff going through. I'd say just have a look through that yourself. Some updates. So we used to have Partner Connect and Marketplace as two different things. Partner Connect for going, I just want to talk to a third party that integrates with Databricks. And you get patched through to a different page. Databricks Marketplace is for selling data or acquiring free data and plugging it into Unity Catalog. It's just been bundled into a single thing now, which makes sense. Stats collection. So if you are using a table in traditional Hive, you could use the analyze command to get it to force it to take stats. Meaning any queries you run about it, it's going to be a little bit faster because it's going to make an optimal plan. Now, we saw some updates to it in where it would do things like adaptive query execution. So it would like have the wrong plan and then change its mind partway through because it realized, oh no, that's not a small table. It is massive. And that's because we didn't have stats. Now, just having stats in the first place means you'll have a better query plan from the start. That's now done automatically if you're using predictive optimization. Again, that is for managed tables. When you're looking at it. So when you write to a managed table, when your automated maintenance job updates a managed table, that is going to track stats automatically. So your queries are going to go faster. Put it simply, predictive optimization Makes queries go faster now. Good. All makes sense. You can go and view your history of all your chats if you are the user who was having a chat with Databricks Assistant. That's like a new kind of history privacy change that we've got. If you've got a continuous job in Databricks workflow, so you set up a streaming job and it just is calling a notebook, and it's like, well, just keep that notebook permanently running. And if that ever fails, there's previously kind of some retry handling you can do. Now, it's automatic retries are baked in with incrementing delays. So try it, and then immediately retry it, and then wait a little bit, and then retry it, and then wait a bit longer, and then retry it. So that kind of thing, just to manage any blips, any downtime, any streaming problems, that kind of stuff. So there's new features about that, just to make sure things are permanently actually running. Very cool. It's an interesting one. I was confused when I saw this one, and I just went, notebooks are now supported as workspace files. They are files in the workspace, but not quite so. So what you can now do is programmatically interact with notebooks as if there were any other file within the workspace. So you can have a notebook that goes and creates single serving notebooks, creates a load of notebooks, runs a load of stuff, and then deletes the notebooks. So you can now programmatically create updates and delete notebooks from within the Databricks ecosystem, which is cool. I haven't quite bubbled up a plan of what we can do with that, but just your ability to programmatically do anything. I am a fan of making sure anything can be done programmatically. So yeah, definitely some interesting ideas. If you've got some wacky madcap ideas for what we could do with that, let me know down in the comments, and it'd be interesting to see what we can build. Notebooks now open faster. I mean, that's always nice. So if you had a little 10-cell notebook, it'll open 6% faster. Fine. If you got a 99-cell notebook, it'll open up to 26 times faster. So if you've got big notebooks with loads of sections, loads of markdown, loads of data in there, they've just really optimized how fast they load, which should help if you've got lots and lots of big notebooks that you're working with. The result set in the outputs of cells within notebooks has just gotten a little bit of a feature upgrade, a little bit of nicety in there. So you can now do is one of in your filtering. So you used to be able to go, we'll filter this to this value, and it would just change the grid of data you've got. But now you can go is one of, tick, 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 tick. Essentially a multi-selecting conditions you want to filter things against, which is useful. Copy result set as. So you can say, well, instead of just like having to copy and paste it as a grid of data in my clipboard, you now copy it as CSV, as TSV, or as Markdown, so you can then paste it into different formats. Just really useful for just getting it into the different formats that you need it. And when you download it, it'll actually call it something sensible. So rather than in your downloads tab just having, well, which of the many files is it? It will have it the name of the notebook that you're going from, which is just useful. So yeah, interesting stuff. They switched over to like the version of the model that's behind kind of the AI functions. That's all the AI query and that kind of stuff has now been switched to be powered by the Meta's Llama 3.3, 70 billion instruct. So generally improvements if you're using that AI query by default. You can import things into your workspace, just dragging and dropping it. So previously you'd have to right-click import, open an import window, and then drag and drop it into there, hit OK, and then it would upload it into your workspace. Now, if you've got that workspace window open, you can just drag and drop a file, and it will upload it into your workspace, which is nice. Kind of makes things nice and easy. Don't use it for data. Don't use it for uploading customer data and lookups. I mean, you can, but it'll be rubbish. Don't do it. Put it in your Unity catalog and do it properly. But it's nice that we can just go, oh, notebook, slap it over, and that'll work quite well. There's a shortcut to adjust the font size if you're having trouble in squinting whilst looking at Databricks, which I am more and more these days. You've now got Alt, plus or minus, or the option, Mac, plus and minus to adjust the font size, or you've got that in a menu. Cool. You can now tag people in your comments. So if you're going down a notebook and you were like, oh, what's that? And you use the comment functionality, you can tag someone's username using the @ symbol, same as we've got in so many different document management systems. So you can tag people with their username or with their email address, and then they'll actually sort of be able to see what they've been tagged in and go and manage comments that way if everyone's collaborating and developing a big notebook together, or Python script, or whatever it happens to be. We've got a new runtime. We'll have a look at 16.2 in a minute. There is some interesting, weird, and wonderful stuff in 6.2, so we'll take a look at that in a moment. You can now publish the tables in multiple schemas and catalogs via Delta Live tables. Now, since Delta Live tables first came along, this has been the biggest thing that people have asked for, going, cool. I can just automatically manage this pipeline of interconnected data, but I have to put it into a single schema. So I've got no ability to have like segregation of security concerns. And I just have to, that doesn't make sense. This is great. So being able to publish from a single Delta Live table pipeline to multiple different tables in multiple different schemas, in multiple different catalogs, just makes sense. So great. Now, you used to be able to do virtual schemas and some kind of things, but this is just aligns it so much better with how people actually think about using this stuff. So that's pretty huge. If you've been using DLT, you'll be singing and dancing or sobbing because of all the workarounds you've done in the past to avoid having to do this, but you can do it now. So it should make a lot of sense. Just so much better. AI agent tools can now connect to external services. It's a really interesting one. So when we talk about AI agents, we talk about tools or skills. So essentially, if I can ask this large language model something and go, well, if you ask me to do that, I would query that database, I'd bring back those results, I'd pick a thing, I'd then go and call this API and call that API and write a message to Slack. And all those things it can do, call an API, write a message, call this, query this particular thing, they're known as tools. They are actions your agent can go and take. So now this is all about actually how do we hook up some pre-canned third-party services so you can just have those tools in there. And how do we actually manage that? So we end up with these things called connections. So if I go, and there's loads of details in here, so much information. So there's all things like the SQL versions. So in SQL, I can just create a connection. It's a HTTP API connection. Here's all the information. And then I can create a function saying, we'll select from HTTP request. So I can create SQL functions that are going off doing an API request using this syntax and then tell my agentic framework, oh, by the way, one of the skills you have is the ability to call this API using that SQL function. And it'll just go off and use it, and then it'll actually just use that as part of its workload. So if we skip right to the bottom, bunch of examples for things like Slack, OpenAI, AI search. So just an example of doing it, talking to UC, creating a SQL function to go off and actually do that. So it's going to go and talk to slack.com. It's going to pull in a secret and a key so it can authenticate with Slack, and then just going off and doing it, which is pretty cool. You can save it as a function inside Unity catalog, and then all the way down goes about actually how you turn that into a little bit of a better function it can actually use that you can then plug into your agentic framework. Loads of cool stuff you can do with there. That is a huge kind of worms of a topic. But yeah, really cool that that's now in there. We can go and do it, and it's part of UC, so you've got the whole security compliance thing that you can have inside of it. Another big thing, we saw clean rooms go preview just back in November, December. And it is great that's now already generally available. That means it comes with full production guarantees. Clean rooms is that thing where you can have two different Databricks workspaces, both with data on their sides in entirely different tenants, entirely separated from each other, going, we're going to put this data into a third-party no man's land, run some scripts on it, and then we can share the outputs with a whole process of who's allowed to see the script, who's allowed to run the script, who's allowed to see the data, just to make sure you can collaborate without necessarily having to expose all of your data to the other side. Load of stuff in there. That is now GA, and we definitely need to do some follow-up videos about how that works and how it fits in, because it's really cool. So many collaboration opportunities that we can actually do. So yeah, very cool. There's another one of the foundational model fine-tunings being retired. It's the Meta Llama 3.1. Filtering datasets for large tables is now supported. So if you're in a notebook and you run a query and it brings back billions of rows, or say it brings back 1 million rows, well, that's going to be truncated down to 10,000 rows. And if you then choose to filter it, it'll just filter the 10,000 rows that it's bothered to bring back into your browser to work with. And people always get that wrong. They go, oh, well, just give me this. And then, oh, it's only 400 rows. Oh, that's surprising there was only 400 in that 1 million rows. It's not. There's only 400 in the 10,000. That was the snapshot you had. This changes that. So now you can choose to apply that filter to the entire data set, which is essentially going to go back and rerun the query to bring back the data. But yes, definitely super useful just for people working more naturally with their output inside of a notebook. Predictive optimization, the thing that's now gathering stats for you. You can now enable it on the catalog or the schema level. So you can just basically sort of control it a little bit, and you don't have to have enabled it first to the account level to do that. So you got a little bit more control, essentially just encouraging more people to actually use it, which is good. We've got the state store reader. Now, this is super interesting. If you've got a streaming query, and that's writing data down into the checkpoint files and folders down back in your lake, it's always slightly awkward to go and actually get information about it. What was the last batch? You can go and have a look at the query if it's still running inside of a Spark cluster. But if you're on a different Spark cluster and you just want to point at a checkpoint location and go, tell me about it. What was the last operation? What was the last batch ID? It was awkward to try and do those querying without going digging under the hood. You've now got the state store reader, which essentially acts like a whole new file format. So you can say spark.read, format state store, load it from here's my checkpoint, and you just get information about the batch ID, the operation, the last thing that happened, kind of what's the current checkpoint look like. Just useful for debugging and managing with various streaming joins. And so much of the data loading that we do is actually streaming. It's just we stream once and then we turn it off. Still very useful to be able to get the state files out of it. Final update on the platform side is there are additional ports for Azure Databricks. So you've now got additional ports that you need outbound access to get the Azure Databricks services working if you're using VNet injection enabled workspaces, which I think most people are. So yeah, interesting stuff going on there. Lots of hidden, sneaky little interesting things are happening. Obviously, being able to go to multiple tables via DLT is probably the biggest thing that's happened. Now, really quick, let's go and have a look at that new runtime that's out. And we can go and have a look and see what's happening. Couple of things I want to point out here. So one is still in beta as of this video. So I'm sure we'll see it go GA very, very soon. Things like you can now sharing table history and Delta sharing enabled by default. That is a behavioral change. So be aware of that, but it's not crazy. Databricks supported as workspace files. We saw that in the platform updates. That is only available as of this runtime. Generated columns. So if you are having a Delta table and you want to have a generated column that's going to be automatically populated without you having to put anything into it, you can now use timestamp diff. It's only the difference between two timestamps, or timestamp add, a timestamp with an amount added onto it. You can now do that as part of your generated columns. You couldn't do that previously. You have a whole new SQL syntax implemented, which is nuts. So SQL pipelines is a way of actually writing and formatting SQL so that it's much more obvious the steps that it's going through. And we see it a lot in time series style querying. If you're working a lot over in Azure, you'll be familiar with this kind of thing from working with log analytics, with Custo. So KQL uses this kind of thing. So you can write, if we had a query that was like that, it had multiple different steps, it had a subquery, it's got do 2 levels of group bys. Actually, if you're writing it as SQL pipelines or piped SQL, well, then you say, well, from this table, do a join over here, do the first level of aggregation, do a second level of aggregation. It's doing the same thing. It's just a different syntactical way of actually declaring those steps that you're going through. Makes it a little more obvious at what level you are in the query and at what steps it's taking at each step. But I find it weird and wrong because I've been writing SQL for a very long time. But super interesting. And I'm sure there's a bunch of things that people can migrate over from other things, which are SQL pipeline syntax stuff, which you'll now be able to do. So yeah, super interesting. Describe table. So if you're in Databricks and you wrote describe table, it would give you like just a grid table data style result set describing what the table looked like. You can now describe it as JSON. So if you wanted to get like a metadata style format, so you can just have that as a JSON object, just a new function to allow you to do that. Just various different useful things you can do with it. And then finally, we saw lots of collation stuff in the last news video. Now we've got this new collation that ignores trailing spaces. So if you have something that, so a string and a string with some trailing white space at the end, they're the same thing. We don't need to treat them as 2 distinct strings. So yeah, big changes. The fact that we've got a whole new language is a bit of a surprise. But yeah, loads of interesting things in there. As I said, that runtime is still in preview. So there is a chance that it may have even more features or changes of features before it actually reaches GA. So take it with a pinch of salt and take a check before you start using it. But yeah, interesting stuff. So as I said, bit of a weird one. As a quick skim, I went, oh, there's not that much in there this month. But as you dig through, there's actually loads of things. Agentic frameworks and like the updates to being able to use the skills. Very, very cool with SQL functions calling various APIs for you. Super useful. The whole fact DLT now can actually populate an entire catalog and schemas and tables and things. Just makes it so much more useful in different scenarios. The new SQL pipe language, tons of different stuff, as well as loads of nice little usability things. So, lots going on this month in January. I'm sure there's a ton that's going to come for February, and I will catch you then. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know of all the things in there, which you went, oh, interesting. It's always good to hear. Cool. I'll see you next time. Cheers.